Welcome to Value Through Vulnerability. This is a human-centered podcast from the listening organisation, and this evening I am really excited to be bringing you, the listener, Kevin Green, who is a multiple non-executive director, strategic advisor, and now author. So good evening there, Kevin.
Good evening, Gary. Looking forward to it.
Oh, fantastic. Likewise. Well, look, would you mind expanding a little bit more on that introduction I just gave for you? Maybe just a bit more depth, a little bit more richness about who you are, maybe a bit of your background and how you've arrived at all of these wonderful and exciting tasks you do today.
So I suppose most people would know me as, for the last 10 years, up until March of last year, I was the chief exec of the Recruitment and Employment Confederation, which is the professional body for the recruitment industry in the UK. I also sat on our global board, the World Employment Confederation. Prior to that, prior to the privatisation of Royal Mail, I was HR director of the letters business within that business, and I joined when we were losing £1.5 million a day, and it was part of the team that turned that organisation around. Prior to that, I ran my own HR consultancy business for a 12-year period. I was asked to run it by some non-execs at 27, 28, did a management buyout 4 or 5 years later, and ran that for 12 years, had a great time working with businesses like Orange and Fuji and BAE Systems and Unilever. So blue chips. And a lot of it was working with HR directors and boards around their people strategy. And I suppose what you can say, if you look back on my career, it's all about business and it's all about people, and the two things are entwined. And I think that sort of sums up the journey, really.
Oh, that's brilliant. I think that's going to play lovely into our conversation today, Kevin. But I think I'd like to go back a little step, if I may, to your background. Because I think what's really inspiring for me is actually, with all of that great experience, that expertise you've demonstrated and shared over the years, you didn't go the degree route, Kevin, I don't believe, in terms of your education.
No, I mean, I was, my parents had one of those interesting calls from school, one of those calls I suspect parents dread. I mean, I was always deemed to be quite bright at school. I was going to be the first working class kid from our family to go to university, but I was really into sport, and I wasn't particularly turned on by school. I had one particular lecture, tutor or whatever, but other than that, I didn't turn up. I wasn't paying attention, and they called my parents down to the school and said, "We think he should do something else because he's really not interested." And that was the start. So my parents said, "You need to get a job." So I went and got a job. This was 1979. So I went and worked in a local authority. And just started doing an administrative job. I don't expect those jobs exist anymore, but that's what I did. And then I suppose over the next 3 or 4 years, my athletic career, I mean, I had a good time doing my sports, and I trained every day, and I ran for the county, and I ran for Southern counties. I didn't quite get an international vest, but I did do a couple of international tours. I ran in the Alternative Olympics out in Prague and stuff. So I was a good athlete, but I was never going to make a living at it. And then what happened was I got promoted a couple of times, and I realized at about 24, if I was ever going to do some interesting work, I needed to do some qualifications. So I encouraged and studied part-time to do a BTEC National, then what was then a BTEC Higher National, like an HNC. And I was then, by that time, in economic development. So I was doing a lot of work around the census and unemployment data, and started to do inward investment and giving grants to businesses to take young people on. And I got really interested in business and also the human side, so I encouraged them to support me, and I went off in the evenings and did my CIPD in the 80s. So that was really my start. I got all my education while working in a local authority, and then started to get a couple of HR jobs. And then somebody I worked with was running an HR consultancy, and they appointed me to sort of work with them, and we were doing a whole range of sort of management development programs and looking at reward systems and all sorts of stuff. So I had a very rich education, but certainly not the standard route. It sort of came to me in a bit later. I had to work a little bit harder for it. I mean, you look back and go, on reflection, having my son's just finished universities now and work, I do think that I would have liked the experience, but that's life. You do it in your own way, don't you?
Absolutely, and I just think it's brilliant. And thank you very much for sharing it, because I just think it's a nice balance. To think, chief exec of the REC, HR director of the Royal Mail. I think for anybody that's listening, that's maybe starting out in their HR career, or someone that's maybe got young children, I just really love that you've shared that, Kevin. Because I think it just shows you've got the ambition, the energy, and the desire. Everything is open to you.
Yeah, I'm a great believer in that. I think one of the things that I suppose is at the heart of my career is this whole thing about learning, and I think I mentioned to you earlier that I think when you look back and you think, well, how did I get into this? I mean, one of the things I take from sport, and I was coached from about age of 12 or 13 up into my early 20s, 3 or 4 different coaches, was, you learn how to get the most from yourself. People that help you set goals, that give you feedback, that hold up the mirror, reviewing results, thinking how you can get better. But it's a learning process, learning about yourself, learning about your training, learning about what other people are doing. I was an avid reader. I always have been. I've always got 4 or 5 books on the go, some novels, but a lot of sort of business books. And in those days, it was all about sport. So, I think I just absorbed an enormous amount from that experience early in my life. And, I think when I look back, I think that's most probably, that thing about you put the effort in, you think about it, you try stuff, you learn, you reflect, you try again. And if you keep doing that, you'll keep improving at whatever you do.
No, that's beautiful. If we start to bring things a little bit further forward in your career, I can't let it go for the listener now. For those that may be listening outside of the UK, would you mind giving a little bit more context of that incredible time that you stepped into the Royal Mail shoes when the business is losing 1.5 million per day? I remember those stories, Kevin, on the media.
Yeah.
What was the context there for our listeners? We do have a global listener base.
So I mean, this is a business. It had a monopoly. It was the first incorporated business in the UK. So when you start talking about culture change, here was an organisation with 400 years of history. The stagecoach, the Queen's Mail must always get through, and it was an operationally driven business. 200,000 employees when I joined, and it had just lost its way. The world had changed around it. We were being deregulated. There was beginning of competition, but the business had just not been able to adapt to its environment, and a very quickly changing environment. The whole thing about email was taking off, people spending less mail, and we just couldn't, or the business certainly prior to me arriving in 2003, couldn't really reinvent itself. And what happened was I'd done a big piece of consultancy work with a guy called Tony McCarthy. He was the group HR director at BAE Systems, where we did one of the first outsourcing of HR transactional services, and we put in a audit model and all of this sort of quite interesting stuff. And anyhow, he got the job working for Alan Leighton, who was the chairman, and Adam Crozier, who was the chief exec. And Tony said, you need to come over and have a look at this organisation. So I came over to have a look at, do a consultancy project on HR, a bit like we did at BAE. We had 4,000 HR staff. Can you imagine 4,000 HR people? A budget of 157 million. But the business was broken. We spent 300 million on consultants the year previously. We had invested in overseas postal businesses because we couldn't reinvent the core business. We weren't investing, and the government weren't allowing us to invest. We had a new regulator that wanted to open up the market. So you had a fantastic British institution, one of the most trusted brand in the UK. People love their postie and their post office. So consumers feel very passionate about it. But as the monopoly was being taken away and we really needed to compete, there was just a need to reinvent the whole organisation. And that meant, to be honest, from a change perspective, breaking things and breaking ways of working, patterns of work, closing things, changing stuff, investing into it. But we just had to do it at pace. And it was quite brutal. And I mean, when I was talking at a conference today about change and transformation, and I always say that change is context specific. And what I think you had in this institution was just, a requirement, a burning platform like you wouldn't believe. but with a lot of people that were the salt of the earth and worked incredibly hard every day. I can remember going out to see some postmen, and they went, look, I used to carry 10 bags of mail. I'm now carrying 13 bags of mail. I don't know how we're losing money, but it's not got nothing to do with me working any harder. And they were right. It was just about our approach to the market and what we needed to do to give them the tools to undertake a big transformation. And a lot of it was down to managers managing people more effectively. And I can elaborate, but it was a great time. It was 5 years of my life. You know, I ended up being, so I went in as a chief learning officer, which was to manage all the OD team, which was big. We had 12, 13 occupational psychologists, about 40 people in OD, a big change team, 2 colleges, 500 trainers. So just trying to sort out the learning part of the organisation. And we did that at pace very, very quickly within 6 months. And then I was then promoted into the UK HR letters job. And this was just working with the operational business and the people in the centre to create a new narrative about what we wanted to do, to empower managers, to change managers, to assess managers, but to give them confidence to have different types of conversation, to work with the trade union. We hired McKinsey to work with them on their business plan. We got them to work with psychologists so that they understood some of the work that we were doing. So it was just a fantastic experience. One that I most probably wouldn't want to go back and do again, but we went from losing £1.5 million a day, so 750 million, 800 million, to making 600 million profit in 4 years, off the back of trying to do it in a way which took our people with us, engaged them. Our engagement scores, we measured it every month at every unit. We basically created this environment where managers knew that we were interested in the conversations that they were having, and we were seeking feedback from frontline staff, because we knew at the heart of this business, the major transformation was around empowering our people and getting our managers to just manage people effectively. And that involved, absence management. I suppose one of my famous stories is, and I can remember going on breakfast TV about this, because we were on the front page of the Telegraph and the Daily Mail, 2 big national newspapers here. And the story was, I gave away 39 new cars. So we gave away 39 Vauxhall Astras, or Alan Layton went round every site. He was our chairman. And the reason we did that was we put in every 1 day of absence cost the business £50 million. And we had an average of 12 days per person. And the trade union used to phone people up and say, you need to take the rest of your sick leave because you've only taken 8, 9 days. So you've got another 3 or 4 to take. So we had to get managers to manage that, to do, to refer people to occupational health, to treat them well. And in the end, we put in the whole hard process. We needed to manage it more effectively because we hadn't done. But at the same time, we were trying to take our people with us on this journey. And one of the things that we were keen to do was to make sure that the change was hard and soft. So that was the mechanistic hard piece. The soft bit was we wanted to say to our people that we would share the spoils of this, that if they could help us change the organisation and get it to survive, it was going to be a better place to work. And as part of that, what we did is we ran a competition in the 31 operational areas and the 8 areas of head office, which said that you don't take a day off sick, we'll put your name in a hat and we'll draw it. And they didn't believe we would do this. And we drew out the names of the hat live, and we gave away 39 Vauxhall Astras. We then did Caribbean cruises. I can't remember. We did it for about, every 6 months we would do it. And what it was really about saying is, in the competition, was you've got to be in it to win it. If you work with us to help us reduce this, we're going to try and share the spoils as best we can. Even though we were losing £1.5 million a day, we put up the basic wage. We created a bonus structure. We leveraged our buying material to create a scheme about bikes and cars and loans. We just tried to basically modernise the relationship and really support our people, because we knew that there would be fewer of them, and that those that were there were already working hard, and we most probably need them to work a bit harder. But what we were trying to say is, this is about all of us creating the type of organisation that we want to work. So a lot of it was about, real engagement. So for an example, the chairman and chief exec would spend 3 days every quarter, 5 sessions a day talking to line managers. And the reason we did that is we were saying, look, you're the most important people. You're the people that engage with our frontline staff. They're working hard. We want you to be able to give feedback, encourage them, help those that want to develop. But, just changing this from a very adversarial, confrontational environment to one where we're saying, we want to take you with us on this journey. We want to save the business. We want to protect your jobs. And there's a great institution in here that if we can modernise, can survive. And, I'm delighted to say the government privatised it for 3.3 billion. It should have been 5 billion, but that's another story about politics and stuff. But, the business has been in the FTSE 100. So, I'm absolutely delighted to be part of that great British institution for a short period of time and played a role, because it was, the stories we used to get about what people did, posties would, look after ill people, help stay with them while ambulances arrived, and get people shopping for them if they were disabled, deliver mail, do all sorts of things for people. And I think it's it's part of the fabric of our community, really, the Royal Mail and the job it does.
Beautiful. Thanks so much for sharing that. I think it's such a rich example. I've just got 1,000,001 questions, Kevin. Honestly, it brings up so much. But I think the first thing for me I'd like to ask you, you mentioned as part of your introduction that you're quite a ferocious learner. You continuously, in your books, you like to grow yourself personally. What would you say the number one, if you could just pick one personal learning that you took away from that very diverse experience of Royal Mail? But what was your number one learning above all else through that period?
I think that people can do quite an amazing things. I mean, I think, you read this stuff, don't you? And we've all experienced it in isolation, where a team does remarkable stuff. Someone sets a goal and they individually or collectively knock it out of the park. But I think, we saw a whole, I can't remember. I'm just trying to think when we did the fight. There was most probably a couple of thousand operational managers who we put through an amazing learning experience. And it was all about them taking responsibility and accountability. And we were giving them the tools. We were giving them not just learning, but we were giving them stuff on a weekly basis. We did all those sessions with them. But it was about empowering them to take responsibility and accountability and make things happen. And they stepped up for it, and they had to do some really difficult stuff, about sorting out their walks and taking control of the rostering and the absence management from the unions. And I think, to do that type of change program with 2,000 managers at the same time. Now, some of them didn't make it, but a very small percentage. And then what you could see, we were then getting them together 3 or 4 years later, and they were demanding stuff. It wasn't us pushing them; it was them going, "Can you help us with this? We need to have control over that." And it was just an amazing experience of how, if you really invest in people, you give them the space, you give them the development, you give them the tools, they can achieve remarkable things. So for me, it was one of those moments where I can remember a couple of sessions where you could just see the energy and enthusiasm that these managers had to, run their own business, to do it in the right way, to take their people with them, to care for the people. We had a death a month. We had suicide. We had, the problem is when you have 200,000 people, there's always something going on with those human beings. And, for me, that was most probably just a remarkable experience to just see those amount of people step into a void, really, and while we gave them everything we could, there were times when they were on their own because it's a dispersed organisation. 2,000 delivery offices, 74 factories, shift managers, shift leaders working through the night, doing that remarkable thing. People don't understand, this was 33 planes, 33,000 trucks every night, 100,000 people working through the night to get them out, to process it, to take it through the thing. And to get that to change was, in an empowering way, I think, something I'm quite proud of. And it reinforces my belief, about the work that I've done, and lots of other people that I'm sure will be listening to this have done, which is, if you give people the skills, the capability, the space, the confidence and the belief, that they can achieve remarkable things.
I love particularly those last couple of things. I'd like to touch on those with you as we start to get into some of the nuts and bolts. As our listeners know, Kevin, it's very much a very deeply human-centered podcast. So that space and those beliefs, how important is that to you to actually ensure that people that you work with, people that you serve, have that space to stop and to reflect and to actually have time for learning?
Well, I think it is important. I mean, we all do, and I've done the job that I was doing at Royal Mail, the job at the REC. These are all consuming jobs. They're traditional sort of leadership jobs. But actually, the bit for me is about, if you create, if you set ambitious goals for people, if you paint a picture, which I think what leadership is about. Organizations for me are just groups of human beings. Forget the mechanistic stuff, forget the processes, forget the technology. They're just groups of people. And if you can paint a narrative or a picture for a group of human beings and say to them, look, we're going to support you. We need you to reflect. We need you to grow. We need you to learn. And here's the way that we're going to help you. We want you to try stuff. You're going to fail sometimes. That's fine. As long as you learn, reflect, go again. Then I think, you're going to create an organization which has got amazing capacity and capability. And that's the belief, and it isn't just through saying that, it's through, the work I did at, Royal Mail was one example, but then I went to the REC. I arrived in 2008, went straight to the recession. The recruitment industry shrunk by a third. So I was immediately into a restructuring. So my timing was off. I was able to grow, go into a growth industry, and ended up, we only had 85 people, but I can remember doing work with my people, which was, look, we've got some fundamental choices here. The industry is shrinking round us. We can't deny it. I'll go to the board and ask that we use reserves. But, we either, we make 25% of the people redundant, or we all take a pay cut. And, you think about it, you reflect on it, and the people come back and said, we'll take a pay cut. I think it was the right decision. I mean, I did it as well. I believed it was the right call, but I was wanting them to take accountability and responsibility. And we paid people back over time, and, we grew the organization. We put all that money back, and more. So it's been very successful over that 10 years. But it was all about people. It was about getting them. So what products could we do? How could we improve the standards? How could we have more impact in terms of the media? How could we, train and develop recruitment businesses? How can we challenge that? So it was about saying you can do anything. So it's always about growth. It's always about learning. It's always about the opportunity to do better and go further and faster, but in a way in which, people are doing it. You don't do it unto people. You ask them to come on the journey with you, and you support them.
Yes, I think there's a couple of things I think is really powerful, Ken, what you just described. One, that painting a picture, that storytelling element. I think that's so powerful. But also this REC example that you went out, and I can only assume, Kevin, is with transparency to everybody to say, look, this is the issue we've got. These are our options. What do we want to do? I just think that is so powerful. For me, I don't see that often enough in the workplace where you treat adults as adults.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I do believe that if you treat people as adults and give them the information and data, and your job as a leader is to do two things really, to say, look, I want to engage you in thinking about this. Now, in that situation, it was very much about showing some vulnerability. Look, I can make this call, but I'd much rather involve you in it, because I think it creates some difficulty for all of us. We've all got mortgages and kids to feed and housing to pay for, and all the hygiene factors in life. But and it was a part of, it was very early in my tenure. It was in the first year, but it was also about saying, I can tell you what we can do. We'll break even next year. We'll make some money. We'll put it back. I'll pay you all back what you give up in this year, and we'll be a better place to work. I was also saying that we're going to have to grow and develop and do things, but we haven't got any money. So we'll do some peer-to-peer coaching. We'll do some focus groups. We'll do innovation groups. We'll do ways of working. And we went through quite a difficult period, but we came out much stronger, and if you want to make an organization strong, get people to understand where you are, the reality of it, the choices that are available, and get them to really understand, ask all the questions. There were loads of questions that I can remember that whole day that we went through that process. But I then restructured the organization. I said, look, I don't think we're fit for purpose. We need to operate in a different way, a more commercial way. It's too silo orientated. And again, you do the change process by engaging the people, because what you're doing is you're dealing with human beings. So you need to, again, explain the narrative, explain the journey, and then allow them to raise their concerns and their issues and their fears. And then you go back and deal with the concerns and the issues and the fears. And that's what builds the confidence and the momentum to step into it and to make the change. So, I think, I learned a lot, I suppose, in my early consultancy career of working with lots of really good leaders and managers. And, the problem we have is, I don't know what the percentage is. 20% understand what we're talking about, perhaps 25% and the most. And many organizations are still very dysfunctional and managed in the wrong way. So the opportunity for us to prove that this stuff works is, I suppose, the work I've been doing for the last 35 years. And I know you're passionate about as well, Gary, but, it's about creating organizations which allow people the space, develop people, treat them as adults, and encourage them. There's a bit of encouragement. So, look, we can do this. I believe that you can do this. We can turn this around. This isn't, a lost cause. We don't have to see this as negative. There can be lots of learning, and we will come out of this in a better place. And both at the Royal Mail experience and at the REC, both of those were true.
That's thank you so much for sharing those, Kevin. That's brilliant. You spoke about vulnerability, as part of this podcast title. I can't let that one go. So if you were going to define, just out of interest, if you were going to define to somebody else who maybe doesn't really understand vulnerability, or they're really maybe afraid of it, how would you describe vulnerability to somebody else? What's Kevin's definition?
Well, I suppose if I was there, I think it's about being truthful. It's about saying unto people what you really perceive to be the situation. So, and allowing them to ask the questions and perhaps not having any answers. I think the thing with leadership is we expect leaders to have all the answers, and it's just a nonsense. What you're really there to do is you're the supporter, cajoler, encourager, developer. So I think vulnerability is challenging people's perception, which is, leader is hero, leader knows the answer. And if you look at great leaders, they're nearly always fantastic at getting great people around them. They will show their own vulnerability. They'll say they don't know at times. They will say, I don't know the answer to this, but I'm sure we can work it out. Here are some challenges I think we need to deal with as an organization, and we need to, grasp the opportunity. So I think vulnerability is about not saying you know all the answers, being quite truthful to yourself and to others, so that you're not trying to pull the wool over people's eyes. You're not trying to play any games. It just is what it is, and we've got some stuff to do. People turn up to work, and I think people want their organisation to be successful. And I think the job of a leader is quite often is to paint the picture and get out of the way. So the vulnerability stuff is saying, don't ask me all the questions. You go away, set yourself up as a team. I might ask you the question, but you can go away and tell me what the answer is and how we structure ourselves, or what we do, and how we support our members, or how we deliver. And that's the job of a leader, I think, is to recognize that you don't know all the answers. You just need to be yourself, your real self, warts and all, and get people. And people, if they care for you as a leader, they'll follow you through. They'll do remarkable things for you because they know that you care about them and the organisation, and you're passionate your passion will come through, and they'll run through brick walls. They'll do, they'll achieve things that they didn't think were achievable. They'll and it's an amazing thing to see, and that's what I think true leaders are about. It's it's not about you, it's about them. You lead through other people. Other people are the ones that predominantly do the work. Yours is to paint the picture, create the scope, try and put the tools and infrastructure in place, get out the way, let your people get on with it.
Oh, it's beautiful. And you know something, Kevin, we've only got to know each other quite recently, but you role model this so beautifully through the examples you shared with the REC, with Royal Mail. And I just need also to reflect on, so I had Gary Ridge, the CEO of WD-40 on a couple of podcasts ago, and his interpretation of vulnerability was very linked to what you were saying. He said the three words I define by vulnerability is I don't know, and being comfortable with that. And I just think, I genuinely believe, from what I see, in work organisations I'm close to and in the network we both share, I still feel that that's quite hard for people at the moment. In your work, how easy do you feel that is for leaders to say I don't know? And I appreciate it varies, but I'm just wondering how common that is for you today in 2019.
Well, I don't think it's not common enough. I would agree with that. I was trying to guess that percentage earlier on. Perhaps it's a quarter or a third have completely got it and feel comfortable in their own skin and can lead that way. I suppose there's another 20%, third trying, not quite sure, don't feel confident enough, find it all quite challenging. And then there's almost a third that don't get it, never will, don't want it, and believe that the world is a different place where it's carrot and stick, that whole fundamental belief in organisations, which is if you don't manage people, will they do the right thing or wrong thing? I think that's the heart of it. There are lots of people that believe if you don't micromanage people and tell them what to do, they won't do anything. So it's a belief in human nature, really, at the heart of this. And I think for us, the journey's about that middle third, isn't it? I liked having the debate with the people that are at the other end of the spectrum, but it's a debate that's very hard to win. I'm really interested in the third, so I want to get the majority. I want to get more people in organisations behaving this way, and that's about that middle third that are trying, that understand it, instinctively feel they need to do stuff differently, but don't know how. And that's our work, isn't it? Because if you grab hold of them and you can give them the skills and confidence and coaching and their feedback, then they'll start trying it and they'll start getting the results and they'll do more of that. And then we're in the majority and we've got a swing in our direction. And then perhaps the people that don't see it our way will just have to recognise that we're delivering the results and the superior performance and this is the way to do it. But I think we've got to show them that, it works every single time. So for me, it's about winning the hearts and minds of the people that are seeking to do it the right way.
I've got to say, Kevin, I really love what you just described. That's the first time. This is going to be, I think, maybe episode 53 of this podcast. So we're in almost a year, and that angle, that clarity, first time I've heard it described, that like almost focus on that middle third. Get them up, and then we can get to a majority of people believing in the people as a fundamental. I think that's beautiful, Kevin. Really, really, really beautiful.
Yeah, and I think it's also about we can't waste our time. You don't want to fight the zero-sum games. You want to work with people. I sort of get what you're doing, but it doesn't feel right. Doesn't feel comfortable, and it takes them longer, and we have to invest more time and energy. But they're the ones where you've got, you go to where they are and then work with them in that space. And I think we've got a huge opportunity. And one of the things I picked up from your podcast is this view that actually we're on the cusp of something, perhaps we're beginning to win the battle. And I do feel that. I do feel that chief execs are beginning to recognise that all the value in their organisation is created by people. It's not by capital and machinery. So that, that intellectually they get it. They just don't quite know how to do it. They don't know how to create a culture and a work environment where, people aren't micromanaged. They can give it their best. And we've got managers that can inspire, motivate, engage, and get people to grow, learn, try things and work in a different way.
No, wonderful. No, thank you very much for sharing that. I think what I'd like to have a little look at now is there's a couple of really interesting articles, that you've shared on social media, but one that you wrote in particular, which I thought was a really nice end to 2018. You spoke about the six key trends to be aware of in 2019 for HR, Kevin. And I just thought it might be nice just to explore as a little bit of what we're discussing today, some of those areas, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think one of the things I'd like to touch on, particularly that's linked to this podcast, is are we brave enough to ask HRDs to tackle poor behaviour at the top of our organisations? Do you mind what are we seeing there? Is that still as valid today? Has that shifted positively for you? Has it gone another direction?
I think you just look at some of the behaviour. I mean, you know the organisations I'm talking about. I'm talking about BHS. I'm talking about Sports Direct. I'm talking about organisations that are, clearly not treating their people well. And within, and some of the Me Too staff, that goes on and on and on. There's story after story. And the issue for me is there's HR directors in those organisations. I want those HR directors to feel supported. I'd like them to feel that they should be going to non-execs. They should be whistleblowing. They should be, and what I mean is, systemic, not where people make a mistake, they say an inappropriate thing. These things happen, but someone is clearly, or a group of people are clearly abusing their position and their power. And for me, HR has got, if we believe in values and ethics, then we have to call that out. And I mean, I've tried to engage people at the CIPD and say, look, you need to support these individuals because they're in a very invidious position, because, going, saying it's the chief exec or other people on the board, potentially going to non-execs and saying, this is inappropriate, this is behavior that isn't acceptable, is a tough place. And it may well involve them losing their job. So as an industry and as a profession, we should be positively, proactively supporting those individuals and saying, do the right thing and we'll back you up. Now, I don't know whether that's a fund. I don't know whether we'll give you some outplay. But the consequence of them behaving in that way and doing the right thing for that individual and potentially their career and their family is quite severe. But I think that if we believe in what we espouse, then we have to support the people that are vulnerable, not just at the bottom of our organisations where there is exploitation quite often, but at the top of our organisations where people are behaving poorly. And I think that we do need to be brave and courageous in that space and ask those individuals to do the right thing.
Yeah, so thanks for sharing. I find it a really interesting discussion around courage and bravery. So I think the flip side for me is vulnerability. What stops us stepping into those conversations? What are we afraid of?
Yeah, I think what it comes down to, I suspect, is that people are scared that, on that board, they could be completely isolated. The non-execs may turn a blind eye. And, how do you then function in that environment where, you said that the top team are not behaving correctly and the non-execs haven't supported you? There's nowhere to go, is there? There's very little place to go, So I think that it is about vulnerability and it is about, careers and mortgages and all of that. So I think the point is we want people to act brave. So, like when I was talking about managers, you want them to do the right thing. You have to support, if people are going to be vulnerable, you need the support. Say it's okay, it's safe, we'll make it safe, we'll create an environment where you can do what you really think is the right thing to do, rather than just leave, which often I think people do, and the behavior continues. Make a stand, be brave, challenge it, hold up the mirror. But to do that, we sort of, as a profession, as a group of people that believe in the human side of business, have got to support these individuals, because if we don't support them, we're asking them to, to take all the arrows on our behalf. And I'm not sure that's fair either.
No, I totally agree with that. And I think it's really interesting. I was really grateful to have Amy Edmondson from Harvard Business School, who's done a lot of work on psychological safety on episode 29. And some of the things you've spoken about on our chat this evening really resonate as well around that failure part and that experimentation and it being okay to try something new without hearing a reprimand.
Yeah.
I think that this safety bit's so key, isn't it, Kevin?
It is. And I think it is about trying to get managers just to you know, I mean, there's loads of really great stuff. If you read stuff around innovation and creativity, it's always you try stuff, but you reflect on it, you learn from it, you go again. Most great ideas, most great nirvana moments, or not nirvana moments, but those, you know, those light bulb moments are about hard work of people systemically failing for a long period of time, and then they get the great idea. So I think that's the whole point in organisations, is we've got to accept that you've got to experiment, try stuff, stand back, reflect, learn. What can we take from this? How do we go again? And if you think about the whole conversation about agile, I mean, that's just you know, sprints, scrums, fail fast, all of that stuff is about just, you know, trying to get into a place where people can, you know, experiment, play is important. You know, you look at kids, don't you? Look at young kids, and they ask the why question all the time. You watch them play, they'll build stuff, they'll knock stuff down, and they just, you know, we're incredibly, you know, curious as human beings, and you don't want to take that away from people when they come to work. We need more of it, and so we've got to find a way of encouraging people. And some of that's about using language. I mean, I think failure is an interesting word. I just think if you talk about learning, people get it. Let's try it out. What do we learn from it? How do we go again? You know, it becomes easier in some ways, but we do need to fail, and we do need to recognise it. So, but it does mean you've got to create a culture where people get it. And there are places I've worked and early in my career, and organisations that I've seen who, you know, don't treat people that way. And they keep people in boxes, and it's the way it's always been done. But, you know, the world catches up with those organisations because they have the answer once, but unless you can reinvent what you do and how you do it, you're most probably going to be obsolete at some point in the future.
And what are you seeing? You know, you've got a really interesting sort of, you know, workload right now, Kevin, in terms of sort of multiple different types of non-exec roles, different strategic advisor roles. What are some of the common themes you're seeing around the people agenda with maybe those variety of clients that you're working with?
I mean, one of the things, I mean, I didn't want to go on a PLC board. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to work in a big organisation because you end up as a non-exec, just, you know, it's about governance and I don't know, remuneration committee and nomination committees and all that stuff. And I've done that, and it's boring. So we went out of my way to find organisations who were entrepreneurial, and it was helping people that are growing a business. And it's really exciting because what they want is just helpers. You know, where do I find the talent? How do I protect the culture? How do I engage people? And the thing about entrepreneurs and owner managers quite often, or even early management teams, is they tend to take too much on themselves, you know, and they don't understand some of the stuff what we've been talking about. They haven't got a lot of internal resource around HR and learning and development and OD. So actually being a non-exec with them has enabled me to help them think about how they go about developing new products, how they take new products to market, their whole succession plan, how do they build capability, how do they build an interest. It's fantastic because you're working, again, with people that have got energy, enthusiasm, and just want to learn, grow, and try stuff, you know. So it's a great place to ply our trade with. So, and I'm enjoying it.
Oh, fantastic. And are you seeing this, that there was a Harvard Business Review report that you shared in the last couple of weeks around profit and purpose? And of course, a lot of us know about BlackRock and, you know, Larry Fink now talking about sustainable investments, etc. You know, how's that showing up for you in maybe what you're seeing in some of these roles, or maybe just for you more generally, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole private equity stuff. I mean, I've had a bad experience with private equity, which I won't go into, but I've had 2 or 3 that have been brilliant, where you actually work with some of these institutions who are funding businesses and funding growth, and they recognize that what gets the return, what delivers the value over a 4 or 5 year period is the leadership, it is the management, it is the culture, it is how you develop people, grow people. And what's interesting is they're often human capital businesses that I've been involved with. They're consultancy business or recruitment businesses or technology businesses. And you can see investors going, yeah, but we're interested in what talent have we got, and what do we need, and how should we structure the organisation, and how do we motivate our people, and how do we take them on the journey, and how do that's really quite refreshing. So I do think that the private equity guys are certainly ahead of other institutional shareholders in understanding some of the people drivers of business performance. So I think it is quite refreshing, and I think I found it rewarding, and some of their insights are quite different. They are obviously driven by the numbers and the value in the business, but they understand what drives that. And if you've got the intellectual understanding, and they know they don't know the answers, so again, in some ways they're quite vulnerable, because they're putting in millions and millions of pounds to back a management team to grow a business on, it's 20 people in their 30s and 40s that have got a great idea, they've done quite okay, but we're going to back them to grow, develop, employ people, and grow this business. So in some ways they're showing even more faith in the leadership and management of these sorts of people or human capital businesses.
Fascinating. I think as we start to look to wrap up, Kevin, there's a couple of things I'd like to wrap up with, if I may. There's this. First of all, I need to acknowledge you and just say congratulations on being recognised as one of the top 100 tech influencers recently. I think that's a very cool accolade.
Yeah, it's always nice. I mean, I think I'm not quite sure how some of these lists are put together, Gary, but the point is, it doesn't matter. It's about celebrating success, isn't it? It's about saying, here's some people doing some interesting work. And I know that when you see those lists, I normally go through and say, well, who am I following and who do I know? And I'll connect with a few other people, and you get some interesting insights, and you make some connections, and you bump into people at conferences, and it's rewarding, because I think you just want people that have got a similar view, maybe different and in different sort of nuances, but a similar view about technology and what it's going to do and how we need to prepare for the future. I mean, I do think there are some big challenges coming down the line, and I do think, in my TEDx talk, I talk a lot about AI and machine learning and how this is going to transform organizations. The jobs in the middle are just disappearing very, very fast. How do you manage careers? How do people grow? How do they develop? And I do think we're going to have some societal real problems around inequality and stuff. So, I think the point is and the answer is lifelong learning. It's getting people to learn, develop, grow throughout their life so that they can add more value. And that means I think we need to do a lot around education. We need some new institutions to help people, people as they, think about Linda Grant's book, the 100-Year Life. We're going to be working until our 70s and potentially 80s, retiring if we ever retire very, very late. 50 or 60 years in the labour market, are people really going to be doing Uber driving jobs and delivery jobs and just getting by and having to do 2 or 3 things? Okay, but how do we create opportunities for people to learn? Those that want to learn, develop, grow, may have fallen out of school, maybe a late starter, people coming back after having children, older people want to think, actually, I could still contribute. I want to do something different. We need institutions that fund learning and development, help people get access to training, development, qualifications, so that we try and make the best. Because, whatever's coming, there is only people and technology. And the one bit that we need to invest in as much as in the technology is in the people side. So I think we need a different response from government in terms of skills agenda, education. And if we don't do that, I think it's going to be some challenging years ahead.
Yeah, it's really interesting reflections, those, Kevin. I've had quite a few conversations the last couple of weeks. One on the education front, because I'm actually an enterprise advisor with a school here down in Dorset. And there's definitely some good work going on around trying to align what people are learning in school and what they actually bring to the workplace. So that's a good thing. And I think what's interesting, though, is that I learned from a friend, Kevin, I don't know if you've had similar experiences, that I've got 2 daughters. One daughter, age 4, has just had her first introduction to mindfulness in school, and a 9-year-old first experience with coaching. So there's this really young generation that are getting experiences of really high value adding human development that a lot of us have had nothing apart from paying for it myself the last couple of years. So I think it's a really interesting shift coming in the next 10, 15 years, I think.
I hope so. I mean, I really hope you're right. I mean, I want to be optimistic. There's a fantastic book I read over just last week. It's called Natural Born Learners. It's by Alex Beard, and it is our incredible capacity to learn and how we can harness it. It's a fantastic book, and it is all about education. So I would certainly recommend that if people are really interested in thinking about learning as a way of growing and developing and enhancing your life and stuff. But we need to I mean, I think the problem is there's loads of good stuff I see in education, but it's all piecemeal. And still the fundamental processes are schools and universities are exam factories. We're just turning out people with knowledge where they can get the knowledge bit at 2 clicks on their phone. What we really need to be doing is getting them to learn how to learn and getting them to reflect. And, going through the learning process is what then creates the value. Because if you can learn to learn, you can learn a musical instrument, you learn to drive, you learn to do this job, that job, whatever job you need to do, because you understand yourself and how you relate to the world. Anyhow.
Well, I'll tell you what. I said as we wrap up, I'm going to get another hour in now. I think. No, so seriously.
I've got one more thing, Gary. I want to say, and that's a bit. I want to talk about HR just for a moment.
No, please. You've got plenty of time. We've got plenty of time. I was just saying, brilliant. Go for it.
So one of the things that I suppose at one level I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed by the HR profession, which I perceive myself to be part of, because the way that we try and run HR, change organisations, is through policies, processes, and practices. That's the traditional way that it's taught. That's the way that most people are doing it. We have to pay people, and we need to hire people, and we need to train people. And I understand there's a lot of transactional activity, but for me, the opportunity for HR to work at and to influence and change the whole culture of an organisation. And there are some great people doing great work. So I'm certainly not knocking the individuals, and certainly lots of people trying to do remarkable stuff. But, I think we're at a tipping point. I just need the HR community to recognise that we've got to invest a huge amount of time and energy of getting the right people into the people side of businesses, that we need to develop them in a different way. We need to think about how we do our work. Is it really the right way? I think some of the stuff we do around procedures, practices, policies get in the way. They stop people learning. We're part of the problem, not part of the solution. And I think that we've got a huge opportunity to really step into that space and develop people and bring different people to it, and utilize the knowledge that we have and the evidence that we have to convince people to manage their organizations and to lead their organizations in different ways. So I think there's a great opportunity, and I just think we're coming to that point. You can just feel it, that we know that we need to step into the future. I came back into HR having spent 10 years at the REC and went and did it. Well, where's all the new thinking and the new learning? And there hasn't been much, if I'm being honest. It's the same stuff. There's been lots of isolated great books and isolated interesting thoughts and groups of people doing interesting work, but there hasn't been any kind of systemic, holistic view of how we actually grasp the human side of business. And I think that's a huge opportunity, and I suppose that's what I just want to be talking about to people in the next few years, really.
No, I think it's a really interesting thing to share, and there's a couple of points I'd like to sort of touch on that with you. If we go back to when you actually described your experience helping transform and turn around Royal Mail, you spoke something about really, really interesting, which was you had a team under learning, I believe you said, which included OD, organisational design.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I keep seeing, and I see on L&D Insight, again, great people, great debates, but there seems to be an identity crisis in HR. It doesn't matter whether it's L&D, OD, HR.
Yeah.
Everyone's always fighting about who owns part of the part of the department. And I wonder if that's part of the problem, Kevin.
Yeah, I think we argue amongst ourselves, and the point is we're not the problem. Well, we might be the problem, but the battle, the war that needs to be won is convincing other people. Is convincing line managers and leaders. That's our job. Is we don't really manage people. We are there as facilitators, coaches, educators, and we need to be able to take. The reason why I think that happens, I'm really honest. I think I think a lot of OD people can't really work within the business. I think they bounce off of it. They do try and do some really nice human work, but it doesn't land because you've got to understand the business. And I mean, the book that I've written it's about business strategy. It's about people strategy. It's about all the different bits. But the bit that gets me is that, the leaders don't get the people side. And actually the HR, the OD, the change people don't quite get the business side. And actually it's not one or the other. It's both. That's what makes the organizations fly. And that's what worries is we end up with a debate amongst ourselves about what's the right tool, what's the new way of doing it. Well, great, interesting. We need to have those conversations, but it's the application that's important. Does it land? Can we create better organizational design? Can we take managers on a journey where they're managing people differently? Can we get them to release, the capability of their people to outperform, to do things which are remarkable? That's the point, isn't it? We don't want to be having interesting, clever sort of conversations to the side when the businesses carry on doing what they've always done, because we're bystanders. And I think we've got to be brave. We've got to be courageous. I think we need to bring different people. I think we need to bring business people that have been leaders into our community, give them the skills and development, and then put them back. I think converts. I think when I've heard you talk, Gary, you always talk about this moment where you reflected on your life and what you've been doing and what you've been driving. They're the people we need. The people. It doesn't matter when you come to it. As long as you come to it, we'll give you the skills and capabilities. We then need to put you back into organisations because you'll have the credibility. You'll have the credibility to say, I've worked for 20 years in sales and marketing or finance or whatever it is. I'm not just one of these, people that have been in HR all my life and played around with models and conceptual stuff and not made it happen. I'm a great believer in, I like HR people that have done line jobs. Yeah, I think you need to understand what managing people's really like. The hard stuff, the soft stuff, managing people is the hardest thing in leadership and management. And we need to recognize that and help people do it, and let's stop, we've got a great new model. Let's do competency frameworks. Let's go off and create new incentive programs. Let's think about how we go from a matrix structure to this structure. Interesting. I'm not saying it doesn't have a place, but there are some fundamental, hire good people. The hiring process in most organizations is poor at best. We're still interviewing people for most leadership and management jobs when we've known for 40 years it's just marginally more predictive of in-job performance than random. So all the data says interviews don't really work. What do we still do? We're still interviewing people to give them jobs. We're not doing collaborative hiring, getting more people to look at people. We're not testing people like we should do or assessing them with activity that's closer to the job. We need to get, and the more you do that, you get rid of the unconscious bias. So we challenge some of the things that are important, but you hire better people, get better at hiring people, and then think about the people that are going to be managing people when they join your organization. Hire the right people, get frontline managers to be able to care for and manage their people effectively. And we're 80% there, I really do, and then all the other stuff is all added value. But, let's not end up with a nice, wonderful conversation to the side about things that we're interested in. We've got to, otherwise we're not really making life better for the millions of people that are at work every day, that turn up and are demotivated and don't enjoy it and don't get rewarded and don't grow and don't develop. So we need to recognize that we've got to try and win the war. It's not having interesting little skirmishes amongst ourselves about what's the right way to do it. Sorry, that was a bit of a rant, Gary.
It's a perfect thing. We need a bit of a rant in a podcast. No, you're being constructive. You're not being confrontational. You're just being reflective of what you see. And I think if I wrap up our conversation, what I'm hearing about, the importance of caring for one another. I love your phrase, learning to learn. Let's get away from learning a task and a job and feeling that's a job for life. Let's keep on stretching. Let's keep being curious. And I just think the more curious we are, the more we enjoy stuff. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. The other thing that I, it's a great piece of work. What was it, 25 years ago? The whole break the rules stuff, the Gallup stuff, about strengths. I mean, you go into organisations now. I mean, I was talking to some HR directors and talking about, strength-based hiring, strength-based development, and they look at you like you come from Mars, and you're thinking, well, guys, this is just, this is how you develop people. Find what they enjoy. What are they already good at? Get them to do more of it. That will make them better as an employee. Find somebody else that likes the other side of the job that they don't. Build, and that's why I think one of the things we miss in organisations is teams. For me, performance, delivering any great task, any great thing is nearly always delivered by a group of people. We always know that teams and groups of people outperform individuals. Doesn't matter how gifted the individual is. But you look at how we manage our organisations. We talk all about organisations and we talk about individuals. Very rarely do we talk about how do you create great teams? How do you really create, how do we give the tools to managers so that they can, understand each of their individuals, create goals for teams, because teams are what really makes organisations fly, and I just think we miss it so often, and you see it day in, day out. So for me, that's why that frontline management is so important, because you get somebody, it doesn't affect one individual, it affects 5, 6, 10, 15. And if you can get great people managing teams, you'll get a whole organisation. And so, I'm passionate about, we seem to miss this bit out of the mix. If you think about processes and policies and what tools we give managers, we don't spend a lot of time talking to them about teams, do we? We just don't.
What's really interesting for me, though, as well, is that you've used the word a couple of times, or at least once earlier in our chat, which I loved, is you used the term, which I agree with, which is investment in people and not people as a cost. And I think, again, part of the paradigm I think that we've got a little bit of an overhang with is I see human beings, and I wrote an article on this actually about a month ago, about exponential human potential. I genuinely believe we are on the edge of unleashing incredible amounts of value from human beings if we can just get out of the way of them, as you said earlier on. But I do feel as long as we're seeing people as a cost and not an investment, an unappreciated asset, I think we're going to keep running into this, Kevin, to be honest.
I think we do, and I think but there's loads of evidence out there. The one thing I always talk about to HR people is about customers, and they go, "Customers? What do you mean? The people we want?" No, the external customer. How does this organisation create value, for customers? And if you think about most of it, if you're in a service business, it's about how you service the customer, how you answer the call, how you meet them in a shop, how you serve them a meal. If it's, car dealership, how you sell people a car, how you do with a service. If it's a manufacturing organisation or a product organisation, it's about having great R&D people that understand the requirements of customers. So in reality, the whole stuff about people and unleashing people is about providing greater value to customers who are also people. So the actual interesting stuff, and use loads of stuff. You go back to the customer service profit chain, some of the work that Kaplan and Norton did around balanced scorecard. It was all about showing that actually the bit that drives performance and superior performance for customers over the long term is the people stuff. So the evidence and the data is there. It's just that people aren't recognizing that to get the return, you invest, like you invest in, you buy a piece of kit, you invest in people, you'll get a return. Which does mean that one of the things that HR and the people, the us people, whatever we are, I don't know what we are, Gary, a collective, a community, whatever we are, people that are interested in the people side of business and human beings, we've just got to capture that learning and play it back. This is the investment, this is the return, that's the business case. I don't, we don't have to be scared of it. It's there, it's clear. There's clarity about it. We don't, you might need to prove it, but, try something in a part of the business, find some managers that want to do some interesting work, help them develop and grow their people, get out the way, look at the results, customer service results, revenue, profit, and you will get the return. So we've just got to capture the learning and amplify. And so we bring people to the party, people that may not instinctively get it, but want to manage performance or want to get a greater return in their organization. They go, there's something in this. I can see the data. I can see the evidence. So let's get at it. Let's invest in our people. Let's train them. Let's grow them. Let's get managers to do it properly. And all of a sudden we'll get the results that we want.
It's, something it's so obvious though, isn't it? For us, it is. But at the same time, You know, I think there's a beautiful podcast I listened to between Bob Chapman from Barry Waymiller and a guy called Kevin Monroe the other day, and he was brilliant. Bob, this is a $3 billion dollar company. He said, "Why do we ask for the return on investment on caring?" Just
well, it's fair. It's a fair challenge. It's a fair pushback, Gary. I think the point is what we're trying to do is to convince the middle third to come with us and convince the other ones that this is the right approach. And to do that, we're going to have to have lots of great examples. And there are some businesses, there's lots of businesses that are already there. I'm working with some now that get it and are just doing it. And you don't have to go through that loop, but there are lots of others that don't. And so for the HR directors and the people because we want to work with them, they're the middle third. That's the battleground. So we've got to give them the case studies from a lot that have already got it, so that they can win the argument, and then we can go again. And it isn't turn it into too much of a mechanistic stuff. It's just saying that this stuff works. This stuff is about doing great things for customers, and it's about showing you care as well, isn't it? You do great things for customers, they come back, they spend more money, they like your product, they like how you treat. I mean, this is, you're right. It's sort of common sense, isn't it? You say it sometimes, and you can see people looking at you, and you go, "This sort of stuff works." You look at the best hotels in the world. You look at the best companies, the best service companies, and they'll always have people really high on the agenda. Because they know over time they've tested it and it works.
Well, so I'm just going to add a little thing in here as well. So within an immediate team that I work close with, Kevin, we transformed literally from going fear-based, so looking rearview mirror, what doesn't work, whose fault is it? Over 3 years, we added over 6 million sales, nearly 2 million margin. No M&A influence, no extra headcount. Literally just a shift in mindset and inclusion. Just there's your evidence, if anyone needs it.
Fantastic. That's what I mean, Gary. Those are the stories. You just got to capture them. We've got to write them up. We've got to keep going. And we've got to give, and that's about confidence. So there are HR directors that believe the right thing, that want to do the right thing, that just get, they're doing all sorts of activity which don't add any value, and they want to get to this stuff. So we've got to help them. That's our jobs as developers and people that believe in the human side of business. We've got to give them the evidence, the confidence, the belief to be able to do the right thing and try and do that change, so that they can create great places to work, rewarding careers, and deliver great performance on the bottom line. And you can, that's the whole point. It's a virtuous circle. It works for everybody.
Well, you've left me with one of my favourite ever takeaways from this first year of podcasting, Kevin. We need to create the space. We've got to help people learn how to learn. I just think that's a wonderful reflection, really.
Good. I'm pleased. I hope there's something in there for everyone. We've gone on a bit and we wandered off in all sorts of tangents, but sometimes those are the best conversations, aren't they?
They are always the best conversations. And as you know, by being kindly listening to a few of these before, they're still fitting nicely. So look, how can people reach out to you, Kevin? What's the best way to connect you if they want to follow up the conversation with you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. I love Twitter. Remarkable thing. I was convinced of that by some people at the REC. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm happy for you to share emails, or I don't mind however people reach out to me. I'm more than happy to have conversations and to help people wherever I can.
Wonderful. Well, I'll make sure all those contact details are in the show notes, Kevin. And look, you've been an absolute joy, and I really hope there's going to be a follow-up to this at some point in the future.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have another conversation at some point, Gary.
Cheers. Have a good evening. Thanks,
Cheers.
Kevin.
Thanks for the opportunity. Bye-bye.
Not at all. Bye-bye.